Gary Willis. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I just did a gig last night. First one in like 20 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You must have been on cloud nine.
It was, well, because of who I was playing with, Gergo Borlai on drums and a great keyboard player from Budapest, Daniel Zabezny, and Hubert Fortune, the sax player I play with. So those guys were amazing to play with. It was fun. Worth the wait.
So what did you do to try to stay fresh during the pandemic?
Let's see. I didn't feel like stay fresh. Like what, playing?
Well, I mean, after being off for 20 months, people used phrases like knocking off the rust or,
Oh,
that kind of stuff.
yeah.
No, I'm,
In the days leading up to the concert, yeah, I found myself practicing, trying to, to get back. I guess it turns out it wasn't enough, but no, I had a good time and it was fun. Thing is, I don't use, like in my technique, I don't use a lot of physicalness. So there's not this sense of warming up or loosening up or getting muscle strong or anything. So it's a lot easier to jump right back on it. So.
Can you talk a little bit about this sort of a minimalist approach as far as movement in your technique? I mean, you have your right hand in particular. Seems like you don't have very much movement. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how you developed that? And was there sort of like an event that caused you to sort of change your technique to that, or is that something that you kind of, here's a bass and this is just how I'm going to play it?
Well, it was no, it was like a 2-year process, a 2-year quest, I think. What instigated it was, I had this little completely underpowered PVTNT bass amp that probably had about 60 watts in it, and I was taking it around to gigs and playing with these incredible drummers that were killing, and my hands were had calluses. They were tensing up during the middle of tunes. I had to shake my hands out. And when any amp is at the sort of limits of its electronic efficiency, the sound deteriorates. If you don't have headroom to bring out the dynamics, the amp is operating at the limit all the time. So the sound, just suffers completely, as well as my technique. But then I took that same amp into the practice room without any things going on and left it turned up and played softly, and it was this huge tone, And so basically the next 2 years were spent trying to get that tone transported to the stage. And what happens is now, like the intensity that's available to my right hand, say it's like this, I try to play like around 50%. And 50% gives me room for dynamics and individual notes, dynamics in between notes and dynamics in between sections of music, softer, louder, percussive, dead notes, things like that impact the music. Basically, if you turn your amp down and you're playing at your limit, then your ability to influence the music is hitting its head on the ceiling all the time. You can't really impact the music. You're just following whatever's going on. So having that headroom gives me the possibility of having impact on the music and guiding it and getting it more exciting or bigger sounding or whatever is needed at the time. So I spent 2 years constantly pawn shop, trading, swapping, building, configuring, until finally 2 years later I had a PV power amp. It was 400 watts per side and two 15-inch cabinets. And that allowed me to play soft and on stage have a big, sound that gave me a choice of how loud I wanted to be. So it's not that I want to play loud all the time. It's just that I want differences in notes not to be a huge effort. And so also during that time, I spent like a couple of years, no, yeah, I would say during this time, 2 years constantly having myself loud and playing softer. Because I noticed the difference in tone when I turned the amp up and played softer, was huge and fat. And when I turned the amp, when I had a less powered amp and tried to play it, I had to play harder, and it was like a softer sound. I was lucky that North Texas State had a physics for musicians class, and they talked about waveforms and stuff like that. And so what I kind of observed, or what I deduced from this experience, was that as soon as like there's notes like piano and like non-distorted guitar and bass and things like that they don't have breath behind them, so they can't get louder as the note sustains. As soon as you hit it, it's decaying.
That's right.
So there's a sweet spot. There's a spot where the string wants to vibrate, and if you excite it louder than that, you'll create a louder attack, but it's a much quicker decay. So the support of a note disappears when you play hard. Like you can reinforce it different ways, with bigger cabinets or coupling with the floor, things like that. But so you create a bigger difference between the attack and where the notes wants to settle when you play hard. If you crank the amp and play softer, the speaker acts like it still has that big attack. You still have impact, but milliseconds later, it's still on that groove, sustaining that loud note with all this air and support and fatness with it, Right. So it was like a long period of discovery. It wasn't like an event thing. It was just like kept experimenting, kept reducing the intensity. So one of the things that feeds is that when you don't play so hard with your right hand, you can have your strings lower, which makes it easier for the left hand to play. You also get your strings closer to the pickup, which gives more output to your system, so there's tons of benefits. And then you get things like dynamics, available to you. So
yeah, that's interesting, especially these days where most of the music is so compressed. And especially, and this is interesting, my first instrument is saxophone. And even saxophone players, there's a tendency to sort of, that sort of really aggressive, open sound at like a full dynamic, kind of level. And not a lot of them have the sort of capacity or nuance to be able to play lower dynamics, which, of course, you're missing out on on lots of opportunities for expression that way.
Right.
But I think part of that is probably unwittingly a response to just the overall compression of other stuff, that they're playing with, and then the mouthpiece technology has sort of, in some ways, promoted that. If you have like a big baffle in your mouthpiece, then playing soft and or playing with stuff like subtone, is much more challenging to do, and you end up kind of robbing frequencies from the lower partials,
okay,
in the sound. But you can also play like louder, and playing maybe altissimo stuff might be a little less challenging to do. So it's like kind of the trade-off thing. So part of that question about what did you do to stay fresh, maybe is also about, as a creative, as an artist, I know you have done a number of projects. I've seen some stuff on like Scott's Bass Lessons. You were collaborating with him in some other things. But as far as like practicing, when you're not going to have a gig, when you don't know when the next gig is going to be. Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video. This gig is going to be. What kind of stuff did you sort of gravitate to maybe prevent you from like going crazy from, boredom?
Well, I tend to not go crazy from boredom because I have hobbies, photography, video. I really like mountain biking. So I think over this whole time I've always been teaching. And so a lot of times, a student needs a new tune, a new challenge, or a student brings in a tune that I haven't played before and becomes a challenge, So a lot of times, I'm reminded of tunes that are fun to play. And after the lesson's over, I'll go to it on my own and just, explore, my vocabulary, explore what can be done on tunes like that, So, that's the enjoyment part of it, without the pressure of like, recording something or having a gig and being ready for this or that. It's just, this is, fun,
So you said you have hobbies, and you said video and photography. Did I hear you say biking?
Mountain biking, yeah.
Mountain biking.
Yeah.
I have an 8-year-old, and I have a mountain bike, and I bought him a what is it? It's a 1-speed. What is it?
BMX.
Yeah, it's like a BMX style bike, and I live in like the suburbs, in a suburban area, so there's like these trails that go all around, like miles in different directions. You can go a long way, and so this summer we spent a lot of time. Well, not a lot of time, maybe no more than maybe a couple times a week. We would go, on the trails. He's constantly asking me to go, and I try to distract him, like, with something that requires a little less effort.
Well, how about a video game or something?
Right. Well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have because he's really taken off with the video games. He loves Minecraft. That's his thing. He had a birthday earlier this month, and the birthday was all like Minecraft kind of themed thing, So and then we just got him a Minecraft backpack. He's going into second grade. Some Minecraft shoes, and so he's all going. And I interviewed Maya Kiltron, who's a great singer, and I had my Minecraft T-shirt on, and I started the interview by, explaining why I had a Minecraft T-shirt on, because I didn't have it on because I like Minecraft. I had it on because my wife was out, and my son saw the shirt and says, you got to get that shirt for Daddy. So then now I'm the representative of Minecraft. I go to a Chipotle, and I had the Minecraft shirt on, and some guy comes up to me and he says that he spent, and he's got to be college age. He's got to be like mid-20s, something like that. He comes up to me, he says, "Hey man, I love that game." He says, "I've spent like $2,000 on that game." I was like, I'm glad I don't like Minecraft.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to talk to my son. It distract him away from this Minecraft thing. It's going to be expensive. Oh, great. But yeah, hobbies. It seems to me that maybe not enough is discussed about balance amongst musicians. There's like this thing like, well, you know, if you want to be great, you got to seal yourself into a closet and, you know, excommunicate all distractions and all of this kind of thing, you know. And it seems to me that though maybe that would cause you to become more proficient, or, you know, yeah, you get more technique if you're practicing a lot. But it also seems that the music that we play, especially as a composing musician, and that's what a improvising musician is, right? Spontaneous composition, that it sort of limits what it is that we can be describing if all we're seeing is the four walls of the inside of a practice room.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you think of that?
it should be, yeah, it should be like a reflection, you know. I mean, because if you are that hermetic, you know, type of person, and that's your only experiences, then what have you got to say as a musician? Like, you know, what amount of life have you lived that makes you want to express anything? What gives you reason to express anything other than to show people what you practice in the practice room that day, you know? So I came to terms with the concept of balance maybe like 10 years ago. And basically what it is that if you're talented, if you have the ability to acquire skills and learn things, and you've learned how to be good at one thing and you want to learn how to be good at something else, and you have all these interests, there's never going to be a balance. There's never going to be a perfect mixture. If you're doing what's necessary to invest yourself into something, then you're not doing something else. And you just have to learn to live with that. You know, you're not going to fulfill this interest or that other interest or that other part of your life. You know, it's just like, okay, I'm doing this now, and it's consuming, you know, my brain cells and my energy and my creativity, and that's it. I'm fine with that. So I gave up on this sense of, you know, all these things I wanted to do and not enough time to do them. I just gave up on trying to get that balance, you know, and I found a little peace there, you know.
Would you say that your approach to this problem is more of a seasonal approach? So you're kind of more invested in something, you know, until that's done, and then you're more invested in something else?
Yeah,
That kind of thing?
it kind of bounces around, you know. Yeah. So like I said, like I gave up on the concept of balance.
Yeah.
And so, and it's sort of, and when you do, then that allows you to like just ignore other things as necessary to get something done or get something learned or get something put together or finish a project or whatever.
It seems like that's just sort of a macro version of focus, right? So like focus is you're obviously on one thing. There's no balance in focus, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, but
That's interesting.
there is something to this concept of balance in that, you know, you have to have lived some life, you know, experience some life to have something to say as a musician, you know.
So okay. So I hear that, and I think I agree with that. And when I look at my own life, there's this idea of that people talk about frequently, work life, home life balance, or, you know, there's these kind of concepts, and I don't know that stuff actually exists. I think it's possible to do too much of something, but it seems that it just doesn't seem like there's okay. So, you know, people get a maybe a bad rap for being a workaholic or something. You know, we use these kind of terms, and I think about that, and I'm like, what is a workaholic? What exactly is that? So if you're saying a workaholic is someone that is using work to push off dealing with something that's of critical nature, then maybe I'll agree with that. But it seems to me also that most of the people that get that workaholic moniker, that's not what they're doing at all. They're just really pursuing their passion, and people don't know what that looks like because maybe
they haven't felt it, they haven't experienced it themselves. Yeah.
It's
So a lot of people that how many people out there have done all-nighters, except in college.
Right.
So
yeah, I have a buddy that I collaborate with frequently. We have a Tuesday night live stream called Getting Ish Done, and he's frequently doing all-nighters. Like we'll finish doing our stream. It's 9:30 to 11 p.m. It's Eastern Standard Time. I know we're on different time zones, and like so after we're done, he's like, "All right." I see him. He starts to take his tie off and loosen his collar. I was like, "Oh, it's another all-nighter, eh?" He's like, "Yep." That's what it is. So sometimes it takes that, and and maybe you want to try to minimize that if you can, but sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, well, like I've been there. I'll just share you the story.
Sure.
There was a period where with Tribal Tech, we got time in the studio, and I booked another session for my solo CD like right after that. So the idea was in the month following that we would finish up because we all worked at home in our home studios. I'd finish up both records before I came back to LA. And I thought I was going to be smart. I anticipated an all-nighter, because I got a flight coming up on Tuesday. So I thought, okay, instead of staying up all night Monday, I'll stay up all night Sunday. Thinking I'd be clever. And it got to be like 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, and I had to like get ready for my flight. So I was literally up for like 63 hours, finishing this thing. That's my record,
That's pretty impressive.
I can't say how efficient I was in those last few hours. At this point, I just, I had to stop. I was like, I'm not getting anything done now.
I can imagine. What is that? Sleep deprivation is one of these torture techniques, right?
Yeah.
You'll do anything. At one point, you'll just do anything. Right. Whatever. What do you need me to sign? What
say anything.
What am I doing? Yeah. So, can you talk to us about young Gary Willis just getting exposed to music, and maybe some early mentors, and then what really turned you on, and when you knew, okay, I think I'm stuck with music. I think this is going to be the thing.
Let's see. I got my parents were musicians in the church, gospel music, and they needed a bass player. So I got a bass when I was 13 on a Thursday, and I was playing it in church on a Sunday. Just sitting behind my dad, kind of like faking my way through things. And then I got a guitar when I was 15. The only music I knew at the time was what was on the radio, and it wasn't challenging on bass. But learning chords and learning songs on the guitar at 15, that kept me interested, and I stayed with that for like another 6-7 years until my third year in college, where I had like a Les Paul and a precision bass, and I had to sell one because the bank wouldn't loan me any more money to go to school. So I became a bass player that way. The bank forced me to. Um, but what I found myself gravitating towards I was kind of good at art in high school, um, and the abstract nature of it, and I found myself gravitating towards instrumental cuts on records. Like the first vinyl that I ever bought with my own money was a band called War. And they had one of their tunes was called City Country City. It had a harmonica melody, and there was no vocals. And I felt like I could identify easier personally without the words telling me how to feel. You know, and so that I found instrumental cuts on, you know, pop records, whatever. And then I discovered the Jazz Crusaders. And so that got me into the jazz record bin. And then I started like going backwards through Chick Corea and then Miles Davis, you know, and at the same time I started associating with the jazz musicians at school. But everywhere I went, there was never a bass teacher. I had guitar instruction for a few years, and I had a great teacher named Jack Peterson teach me guitar. And so when I'd been in college like 3.5 years, and I knew I was not going to be an acoustic bass player. And the jazz education degree that I was taking was going to require another like 2.5 semesters of classical upright, which I sucked at. So I just dropped out of school. You know, I saw no future in a classical, you know, bass for myself. I didn't own one, wasn't interested in one. And so after that, I joined a top 40 band. I saved up enough money to buy a Fender jazz bass and turned it into a fretless. And like I always tried to put myself in positions to learn, you know, to be with better musicians, to be playing with this better thing. So it never really became a choice. Okay, like I'm gonna be a musician. It was like I was around enough musicians in college to learn that you could play weddings and things like that, and I did what I could there. But you know, just where my head was at. For example, there was when I moved to LA, I knew like 2 people, and they were both on the road. So I was literally calling people up saying, "Hi, I'm a bass player," you know, blah blah blah. And one of the gigs that I got to do was a wedding or party or something like that with one of like the major contractors of casual musicians, what they're called out there, casuals. And he was like the booker. He could book, you know, he could make your career, you know, if he liked you or if he wanted to use you enough. And on that gig was, I believe the guy's name was Dan Armstrong, who makes pickups. He made a bass also at one point. And at that point, I couldn't afford to experiment with stuff in the music store. So I taught myself how to make pickups. You know.
Oh my goodness.
I got magnets from stud finders in the hardware store, and I glued them into a PC board, like, you know, thing, and I stuck it on a drill, and hit it and wound the pickup, and the guy noticed, like, hey, that's your own. And so I spent the whole break, instead of like trying to advance my career with the leader of this booking guy, I just spent my whole break hanging out with the guitar guy and talking pickups and winding and stuff like that, you know. So it never was about career as much as it was just learning, you know. Mm-hmm. It's like that was always the appeal of jazz and instrumental music, is that it was more abstract, and that's what I strive for every time I play and write and compose and improvise, is that I want the music to be abstract and not just about the notes, but about something bigger and greater than, you know, than just, oh, it's that scale, okay, that's, you know, it's that riff or it's that lick or whatever. you know. So the abstract nature is like the paramount, you know, priority every time when I listen to music and evaluate music, or when I do it, you know.
Yeah, that's so you just sort of woke up one day and found yourself in a career in music, and you never necessarily planned it that way.
Right. Yeah, I didn't really know that you could, except that, you know, I could pay the rent, you know, barely, you know, $100 a month when I was at North Texas, by doing some gigs. But I never made that, like, you know, a thing, you know, because like I was always into jamming, you know. And so when I moved to LA, you know, I did maybe 6 gigs in 6 months, and 2 of them paid. And the rest of the time I was with percussion players, different people like that, just organizing jams in people's living room. And those jams sometimes were tunes, sometimes they were just sound events, you know, and textures, and, you know, things like, have you ever heard a hair dryer next to a pickup on a bass?
Oh, huh.
Like shit like
No,
that.
I haven't.
You know, I did, it's funny, I did this little clinic tour with Simon Phillips, and he had a variable speed drill that had a bit for changing drum heads, because he changes drum heads a lot. And so I just grabbed it, you know, I knew it was going to make a sound, and I started, like, with the variable speed, you get these wild pitch changes and stuff like that. And so we made a tune out of this, me playing the variable speed drill on my bass, you know, and played it on that tour, you know. So I learned to jam before I learned, like, the names of the notes and stuff like that. So it was always about the abstract nature of it.
Yeah, these days it seems that though in some respects the pedagogy has advanced to a level that you'll see many more like child prodigies than there ever were.
Yeah.
Just as far as just being able to play the instrument, but it seems in many cases that it's a lot of technical proficiency, but not necessarily a lot of soul.
Mm-hmm.
Not soul in the
Or storytelling.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Soul in that sense is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like, so for, you know, I mean, I've kind of observed this about musicians over the years, is that for some people that it comes easy to, maybe it doesn't have as much meaning, you know,
That's interesting.
to them, and their, you know, their ability to express, you know.
So this is interesting. One thing that I tell my students frequently is that there's no replacement for repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So, say if you're a person that has an ungodly amount of natural ability, and it doesn't require as much repetition for you to get something together, there's still no replacement for repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So the person that maybe has half or less of the natural ability, that actually had to go and play it that 1,000 more times or whatever it was to get it together, there's going to be something in their playing that's not in the other person's playing, that just played it maybe after the third time of trying it.
Right.
Seems like there's more meaning developed. It seems like humans derive meaning from struggle. So like if everything is easy, then it's like, what's the point in doing anything, right? It's sort of maybe part of what the issue is with, young people having access to everything in recorded history.
Yeah.
You know, in most cases, not having to put any skin in the game, don't even have to pay for it, right? It's just there. It's very easy to make a, maybe not intentionally, but to make a sort of value judgment on things based on what it is that you had to sacrifice or
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's no sense of ownership with music anymore. So, like, it used to be when there was ownership, there was consequences. Like, okay, I'm personally going to spend this money, because I identify with this music, and that's my connection to it. I'm sacrificing to experience it and have it in my life. Where now there's no sacrifice involved. It's like, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that, and it doesn't cost anything. So it's a much more impersonal relationship with what we do.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? It's music is 1100 1100.
Yeah.
It's like it's like some binary code.
So
Okay.
we're seeing like a breakdown on both sides of things where, and so it's kind of got me like, questioning what I do. Not the teaching part. I'm totally convinced that I should be a teacher. I enjoy it and I'm good at it. But the actual business of music, like I said, there's like this breakdown on both sides where you've got how people consume music is they're not invested in it. They're just like casual observers. There's not really a lot of passion there. And you got these people that do music, and because they have all these tools and things to get them to proficiency quickly, there's not like this sense of sacrifice of accomplishment, and so, like I said, it's kind of breaking down like the whole relationship between the artist and the consumer, so you've got people that are really passionate about doing music and they're going to do music, but their ability to like continue doing that or have an impact like Miles or somebody like that is like it's not there anymore. It's not possible.
That doesn't exist. I think the last let's see, I don't know, maybe Wynton, or I don't know, maybe Josh.
See, and anymore these days, they're just influencers. They're not, they're not held up, to us as this standard.
Yeah, it's right. Right. And part of that has to do with, so good, bad, or indifferent, in the past. And there was, a lot of corruption and everything else, and maybe some questionable stuff in payola and all of that stuff that we know that.
But they serve a great purpose as a filter.
That's right. But that's right. That's right. I mean,
it kept a lot of mediocrity out of the market. Maybe not enough, but
yeah, right.
Companies did provide that service.
Yeah, and. Yeah, so it's like one of those things. I frequently have said this in this interview series. This idea of removing fences that you don't know the purpose of, why they were there in the first place. When you remove those fences and you don't know, you better get ready for what's going to happen, and you have no idea of what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And in this situation, by sort of quote unquote, universalizing, leveling the playing field, whatever, phrase you want to, expression you want to use, unwittingly, we have, removed that filter. Mm-hmm. And so now, everyone has, a lot of folks have good recordings, setups in their home studios, and they can produce studio quality stuff right out of their house, and all of that stuff is beautiful, and I'm fine with that. And just release the stuff to like YouTube or SoundCloud or whatever, and then you can get it to the whole world. But there's a lot of good stuff, but there's a lot of bad stuff.
A lot more bad stuff. Lots and lots and lots more.
See, I was trying to be kind.
It's, kindness is not, like, yeah, the thing about me and my opinions is that I I don't take music personally.
Mm.
And so I think hate is like really a useful thing if you're
Mm.
trying to have an identity as a musician. You know,
Oh, that's interesting.
if you hate this and you hate that and you hate this style of playing or hate this way of playing or hate this, you know, then you've saved yourself a lot of time. Now you have to have good reasons. You have to understand what it is you're rejecting. You know,
Great.
but I mean, I can't remember this director who said it, but like, but it identified with it in that like it's like what were some of his influences, and like, and he just said like there was just so many directors whose films he watched, and he said I never want to do that. I never want to, So for me, I'd hear bass players, and I'd say, oh, I never want to sound like that. I never want to play fills that way. I don't want to play a solo. You know what I mean? So
Mm. That's interesting.
you can get pretty far if you learn. You have to understand what it is that you're rejecting. Like I said, and you can't like navigate your way to an identity just on the negative side of rejecting things. You also have to embrace, oh, this really communicates with me. I want to learn how to do that, and then add it to my toolkit so that, eventually, you add enough influences that you start to make choices not to not sound like somebody else, but because that's what you want to hear at the moment, So
So
that's the positive side of opposite,
yes. Um, so we were talking earlier about your technique and the minimalist thing, and I just wanted to. So okay, so my first instrument is saxophone, so saxophone, flute, clarinet. Um, I consider that those are like my uh, I don't know exactly because I don't necessarily consider myself. I consider myself whatever I'm playing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I think about it. Now, most of my education in formal instruction has been for saxophone, but I started playing some of these other instruments because I wanted to work, and I mean, I enjoyed those instruments, so I started playing bass. I'll tell you how I started playing bass. This was, I think it was like 2005, and my my first marriage was was over, and so I had a lot of time. I had a lot of time on my hands. She moved out of state. I didn't have to see her anymore, and it wasn't a good situation. So rather than using the time as destructive, often people when they go through stuff like that, it's a lot of personal destruction, and so I was like, okay, well, what are some things I can do that are positive? And Victor Wooten, who I had been playing with, he came to Columbus and to the school that I teach at, Ohio State, and who's it? Paul Robinson, who's the bass professor, the contrabass professor. He had Victor come in and do a master class for his students. And, I'd known Victor for a while and everything. So, of course, I've heard him play in everything. But there was just something about this master class. I sat in on the master class. I actually recorded it, but I can't find the recording. Oh, it's terrible. But I went to the master class, and as soon as the master class was over, I went to a music store and I bought a bass.
All right.
It was just something about what was going on that I was like, man, I got to do this. And so that summer, and this was towards the end of the school year, that summer, I was practicing 4 or 5 hours a day. You know, I was watching all kind of bass videos, I was watching you like crazy. I was watching all this stuff, you know, constantly. And I was like, oh man, you know, and a buddy of mine, he actually turned me on to you. His name is Scott Gold. And Scott Gold is a terrific bass player. He was, I call him my first bass teacher. I never took lessons with him. He was just a great bass player that played in a couple bands that I played in, and he was just really generous. And so he started teaching me some stuff, and he laid a bunch of stuff on me. It's like, oh, I like this, you know, I hear, you know, do this with your fingers. Hey, check this out. I couldn't do a slap for something for some reason. He was like, oh, you know, here's the technique. You know, he's just, you know, very generous. So for whatever reason, I gravitated towards these sort of extended range instruments, not because I wanted to play basses with a bunch of strings on them, but because at the rate that I was willing to pay, I just kept, you know, like, so the bass that I gravitated to first was a 6-string bass, and then somebody was like, hey, you know, but that's a passive one. You want the active electronics. Here's one that's got 7 strings on it. And I was like, okay, well, let me try that. So what ended up happening, I'm saying all this to say that I started playing on really heavy gauge strings because of the extended range on the bottom. Right. So the bottom string was like a 165 or something, you know, to get like an F sharp out.
Wow.
And so right from the jump, I started playing. I was playing with a lot of tension. That's what I'm trying to get to. And I didn't realize this, but it was I started to have some issues with my hands, and I think it was because I was working too hard.
Yeah, sure.
And I was practicing a lot and working too hard, you know, when I was playing. And so then I started playing guitar. You know, several years later, I started playing guitar. And the guitar, I had like this really heavy gauge strings because I was trying to mimic the sort of tension I was getting on the bass. And then I started going through this, like, okay, I think that the tension that I'm playing with, that's what's causing some of the issues I'm having with my hands.
Of course. And
so then I was like, okay, let me see if I can get down to like 9s or something on guitar. And then I started reducing the tension on the strings on the bass. And so I play with pretty like medium gauge stuff now, and with a lighter tension, and I try to focus on that. But what I feel that happens is when I don't have as much tension, my the speed that I can play with suffers. So my question for you is, as you're playing with really light, you know, touch like you do, what is it that you're doing to still be able to play with the unbelievable facility and speed that you have? Because it seems, it seems that there can be a relationship between tension, because of if you have more tension, then the string doesn't move as much.
You can have lower action.
Right. So it's a mouthful, but
so let's see. I use like, I suppose it's medium, but then when I get to the B string, it's a 135. Okay. So it's like 45, 65, 85, 105, 135. The thing about tension, it's one thing which caused me to extend the ramp all the way to from the pickup to the neck, because back when I first, you know, noticed this problem of, you know, my hand cramping up and having terrible calluses, I was used to only playing over the back pickup, you know, and that was the only way the sound could cut, you know, and I was like conditioned for that tension, you know. But as I finally got a fretless and started discovering the tones, I realized that, the further away from you play from the bridge, the fatter and sweeter and deeper the tone is, but you're not going to get as much mid-range. But the physics of a string is that the further away you get from the bridge, the less tension is on it, and so you're tempted to dig in and play too hard, which is kind of a no-no in my world. So the first ramp that I made was actually 2 pickups next to each other. I wanted to experiment with that sound, 2, like in the jazz location, 2 next to each other, and the DiMarzios that I were using had screws where you could adjust the individual pole pieces to make the middle strings, the A and the D, match the volume of the E and the G. But those screws had threads on them, and they were like eating my fingers. So I got some electrical tape and a hole punch, and I just made myself a little ramp, a curvature, to protect my fingers from being cut up like that. It ended up, I didn't like the sound of it, so the next bass that I made, I just made a little, because I play with 3 fingers, that was a nice platform for over the pickup sounds. So I put a piece of wood there, in replace of that pickup, and kind of got used to that. But then I started building my own bodies, and one of the bodies I settled on was an alder body, because I knew woodworking. I could cut, a body and get the neck pocket and cut routing and stuff like that. But alder doesn't have any grain to it to speak of, so it's not beautiful when you stain it. So in order to paint it, you put a sanding sealer on it. So the sanding sealer was white. I sprayed that on there. Then I sprayed it black, and it was like fine. But then over like the course of 6 months, I noticed like this groove of white started appearing like between the pickup and the little ramp that I had all the way to the neck. And I discovered that's where my thumb was going. That's where I was getting a lot of tones, And so it dawned on me like, look, just make it go all the way, because like that's where I want the tone to be sometimes, a lot of the times. And that's where like I said, the temptation to dig in and play too hard exists, is where the tone is best sometimes for certain pieces. So you might consider a ramp. I noticed there's one on that bass behind you, but I don't think those are match the curvature of the neck.
No, it doesn't. And I do play with ramps. And I definitely was influenced by you. And I also play with 3 fingers, influenced by you. And I think Scott Gold was influenced by you to play with 3, and then I play the way he plays. And this is Conklin here. That's a Bill Dickens Conklin.
Okay.
And it's a 7-string. But I actually have clear. There's clear tape underneath each one of them, but it's acrylic, clear acrylic.
Cool.
So you can still see, you can still see the pretty stripes.
Nice.
And that neck is actually pretty flat. So that's actually not too bad. But yes, on this one over here, which that's an Ibanez. Yeah, that's just the ramp that came with the bass. But yeah, okay. So you're saying that
so that's
something that has more of the contour of the neck, you're saying.
Yeah, that's an important part of it. And the other thing is that, the ramps on my basses intentionally became adjustable because everybody has different my fingers are pretty flat, so I don't require much space. So the other thing is it's just like as discovering like this kind of process I went through of discovering the floor of your dynamics. How soft can you like get a tone, and if you open up that floor, then that will allow you, and if you spend more time playing in that lower place of intensity, then that'll allow you, to like I said, I spent 2 years making myself uncomfortably loud. Every situation, headphones, practice room, gigs, whatever, just to force myself to chill with the right hand. You know, so it was not like an overnight thing. It was like I had to overhaul and continually overhaul for like 2 years. And at the same time, my amps environment got better and better and bigger, and you know, to where I was hauling, you know, 215s and a power amp and a rack, you know, to gigs. That's one element of this fluidity, is like reducing your average intensity to like medium or less, you know. And what that it entails, and here I'm sounding like an old guy on a soapbox, but like bass players have gotten like really lazy, you know, and really spoiled with like this super light obsession, you know, and they don't bring enough to the gig to have an impact on the music. You know, if you can't keep up with the bass drum and the intensity of the drums, then you're not able to influence. You're just along for the ride, and you're probably killing your right hand playing too hard and not being heard, and not exploiting dynamics that are in your right hand, you know?
Yeah, when you said light stuff, you mean the amp.
Amp and
Like they're right. You don't mean light with respect to action on the instrument, because you're advocating for a light setup, but
yeah.
But you just want to be able to play a big sound, and you need to have enough volume to match the sound of the drums
With little effort.
With little effort, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that means bringing enough to the gig, you know, or bringing more than enough for those like moments, you know, where like a big sound can be accomplished with like a pretty medium touch. So if you're not like conscious of all of those environmental influences, you know, how much amplifier you have in the gig, how much bass do you listen to yourself, can you hear yourself when you practice, you know, can you make yourself uncomfortably loud and get used to playing, you know, with less intensity, and keep it clean. That's another thing that I had to really come to terms with, and that's why my 3-fingered technique developed, is because, okay, here I was trying to get like a louder sound, but when you turn that bass amp up, then all the strings ringing and the buzzing and the sloppiness is cranked, you know. So you got to take care of a lot more shit, you know. You got to take care of the end of the note. You got to take care of strings ringing, you know, all this, you know. But the benefits are having an impact on the music, and eventually fluidity, you know, in that your left hand is not working so hard because your action is lower, you know. The other thing is like this thing that I introduce to anybody, any student that I met, no matter how long they've been playing, and that is that there's no indicator for your left hand of how hard it is necessary to squeeze to get a note. There's no universal indicator, you know, and so you can squeeze it to death, and there's no benefit. There's only pain and slowness getting around the neck. You know, you're carrying around these weights just to play a note, you know. So I have people play like continuous C's on the A string, for example, and you gradually lift up with the left hand until it buzzes, and you do that for each finger and start to learn where the cutoff point is like how much pressure is necessary to keep it clean and not buzzing. And most people, one finger might have this window of pressure on it, but most people's fingers are like an on-off switch. It's like on or off, and there's no pressure sensitivity. So that's another possible solution to your left hand, is that getting it to like work minimalistically to keep the note from buzzing.
Okay.
And I kind of teach it like kind of as a Zen thing, like 5 or 10 minutes before practice. Like take the F sharp on your E string and in each finger on each string and play them continuously and straddle that buzz point, continuously with the right hand and buzz, not buzz, buzz, not buzz, and educate each finger on each fret on each string how much pressure is necessary to keep it right at that point. And it feeds everything. You relax over here, you start to relax over here, you relax over here, it makes this relax more, and you relax, then you've got speed and fluidity and efficiency.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's great. I'm putting that in.
Okay.
That's definitely going into the practice routine.
Check it out.
I definitely will. So, because what I generally do, and I've gotten better about it, but still not nearly as relaxed as I can be. What I was doing was I was like, okay, I just need to make sure that I'm stretching enough. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is I would still be playing hard, but then I would be frequently doing all of this stuff, okay, all right, I'm okay, I'm all right. And then I play hard again, and then, okay. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, so there is like people that have studied with me and have embraced this approach, of playing lighter. There becomes this, there's this turning point where you're using like very little energy over here, but you're on stage and the band is thumping, the house is bumping and killing, and you're just like doing this.
Yeah, that's what's up.
That's a huge contradiction, and you have to learn to like be able to manage that contradiction, because you want to get into it, you want to slam, this is like killing stuff, but it's not necessary. It's like it comes out of the amplifier, and it comes out of all the preparation you've done to get to that moment to where like this little bit of effort is just like moving the whole house.
This is interesting. So a little bit of a different context, but similar concept. So I'm a fitness advocate. Mm-hmm. I'm a bodybuilder, powerlifter, and one of the benefits,
that's just like a red flag just went off for me.
Oh,
as far as playing bass, because it comes into play in mountain biking.
I see.
Because the more you increase your grip strength, mm-hmm. the more you're increasing the influence of each finger on the other, in that this one wants to work with this one, wants to work with this, and you kind of lose independence the more you increase your grip strength. So I encourage students to do free weights as much as possible, and not this, and mountain biking, you've got a handlebar, and if you don't have good suspension, then your hands are bouncing and you're holding on for dear life. If you don't have good brakes, then you're squeezing like hell. And that was like my introduction to mountain biking, was like killing my hands, So my pursuit of mountain biking equipment has all been in service of keeping relaxed and control. Because like when you've got good suspension, your wheels can stay on the ground. You can do things like steer and brake, critical things that if you don't have either of those, then your hands are going to like absorb all this energy, and you're going to be squeezing, and you're going to get, like I said, this sympathetic strength of a group of fingers, but not individual like control or independence, or finesse.
Right. So, I get that.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, no, I get that. I don't do anything that that specifically works on grip strength. So for instance, anytime I'm lifting something, if I'm doing like deadlifts, or if I'm doing some kind of rowing motion, then I always have I wear these hooks,
Okay, perfect.
and
Yeah.
so that the hooks are doing the work and not my grip.
Awesome.
Because one thing I noticed from maybe a little bit too much training forearms in particular was that I started to experience that sort of diminishing returns thing that you're talking about in my hands. And I'm real careful about this because I'll train, and then the next thing that I do is I'm practicing, because I want to make sure that I still maintain a certain kind of subtlety. But I brought up the weightlifting and things is that I brought that up to say I know when I'm under load, right? And one of the things that I do when I'm doing whatever motion is I try to hyperextend so that I can be as relaxed as possible at the other end of wherever the tension was. So it's not constant tension. It's going between having tension and then being totally relaxed. And in some cases, especially with like up here by my neck, it helps me to actually keep my shoulders down while I'm playing, instead of doing that thing where your shoulders keep coming up and up. You're playing like this. It's actually helped me to have better
Posture,
better knowledge of if I'm actually under tension in that part of my body or not. Another thing I think is, especially like having things hanging around your neck for long periods of time is probably not the most natural thing. And I know that, I started really young with saxophone, and the saxophone was really very heavy when I started, because I started when I was 6. It was an alto. So the saxophone was very heavy. And then over time, you start developing weird stuff in your neck, and I was getting sharp pains and stuff in my neck. And actually, the only thing that actually eventually solved that issue was actually developing some strength in that part of my neck, because I'm not going to not play. I mean, that's kind of what I do. Right. So I had to try to find a way to counteract that. But understanding when I am tense, when I'm actually tense, and then also when I'm actually relaxed. And maybe that seems like a simple thing, but it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's, so it's been like a kind of process of discovery.
Yeah, but just, like investigate the mechanics of how much is going on here, as far as how much is actually necessary to play,
Right. Okay. So, one fairly recent development was, I seen it in the background, one of them in the background, this bass that you developed with Ibanez, the fretless, which I haven't been able to get my hands on one yet to check it out, but it's beautiful, and of course you sound great on it. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like, working with Ibanez, and maybe kind of from beginning to end, sort of, in...
There's a period of time, let's see, I was building my own instruments, and then I started to sub for people in LA that had 5 strings, and I couldn't get my hands on one, but I knew that there was I don't know what kind of, there was some bladed pickup that picked up continuously from the E string to the G string. So I went to the music store where they had this collection of parts, and I got myself like 2 Telecaster saddles and an extra guitar tuner, and I cut holes in a jazz bass bridge and sandwiched two little saddles in between the three big ones, cut a hole and put a tuner, and I made my, jazz bass a 5-string with this pickup that, allowed me to, and that was my way to get into see if I wanted to do it or not. And so I knew what I wanted in a bass, and how pretty much I learned, at least from where I was at that point. And then I got an endorsement. Well, it was like a cost endorsement, like I got the cost of a music store price of Tobias basses. And he was in Hollywood building at the time, and I was teaching there at Musicians Institute, so I would go over there after work and bug him. And I knew that from the properties of wood and physics, that the lighter a piece of wood is, the deeper a sound it's going to get. It like it's the resonant frequency. Like it's something that's very dense, like a piece of glass. You tap on it, and you get a high pitch. Something like a piece of foam,
Right.
some like piece of foam, a lot of air in it. You thump on it, you get a thump loud sound, thump heavy low sound. So so I knew that the bodies of my instruments, I wanted them as light as possible. So he put he wouldn't go bolt on, because he was still doing neck throughs at the time, but he put the lightest wings he could, and through that relationship, I was able to meet Bill Bartolini and get him to make the pickup for that bass, and I played those for a couple of years, and I'd had Tribal Tech at that point with Scott, and he was with Ibanez, and during my time teaching there in LA, every 6 months would be a new crop of students, and they would see a ramp and want a ramp. So I was building ramps for students all the time. And one student had this, at the time I was just, this one student had like a 24 fret, kind of a light body, it was bolt on. And I thought, that could work. That's really something I'm into. So talked to Ibanez. They sent a couple of guys over with slide rules and calipers and things like that, and they measured the bass that I had built, and they built me one from their stock, and it looked like one of their production basses, but it wasn't a signature bass. Like they were making it just for me, but they weren't selling it. So I was with them and developing instruments and making choices for about 7 years before they came to me and said, okay, we're going to do a signature instrument. And it was like me and Verdine White and Doug Wimbish were like their first bass signature artists. And I was like in awe, Verdine White, man. And so that process took about 2 years. I thought, okay, signature bass, I know what I want. Let's do it, blah, blah, blah. No. It was like a 2-year process of faxes back then, and emails and sending prototypes and meetings, they'd come to meet me on the road and things like that. And I was so lucky to work with Bartolini in building like this custom ramp-shaped pickup. With individual pole pieces, exactly the height and depth that I wanted, So I was really lucky that they were taking that chance, and there was a moment of it was kind of a make or break moment. It worked out really well, but the tuners that I use, the triangular.
Yeah.
So at that time, I was using radio knobs, just plastic. They look like mag wheels, but they really lightened up the headstock, on my basses.
Okay.
I did some patent research and found out somebody had patented round and parallel. So they came up with this kind of triangular shape, but it wasn't like open to your fingers to fit into. It was just like a triangle extended. And I begged them. I got on, practically got on my knees at a Frankfurt show and said, please, please, send me a couple more of these. And I got a file, and I cut out these indentations so your fingers could fit. And at that time, they were telling me that to make a mold, to make these knobs, to blast the plastic into and stuff like that, was like 10 grand. And like, this is like their first signature instrument foray. Like, how are they gonna amortize this cost? They're gonna put it on all their bases. They were like really worried. But they consented to my, desire, like, please, please, please do this. And it turns out, like, over the years, it's like the most popular signature bass that they've had, or most successful or whatever. So, it's been a continuing process of experimenting things. Like, now I have 3 basses really. There's the high end signature. It's called the 1005, and it's made by hand by these incredible luthiers. And the tolerances for perfection are just like, I get it out of the case, and it's my bass. It's set up, it's played, ready to go. I'm in awe and humbled by it every time. Then they have a let's see, I think it's a 205, GWB 205. And that one has identical physical specs, but it's made at a factory in Indonesia. So it has the Bartolini pickup, it has the same electronics. And then I have the GWB 35, which is I think it's like $999 price point. And it's an ebony neck. They're all ebony necks now, ebony fingerboards, I mean. And it has Ibanez pickup in it, but it has the same physical dimensions, same ramp and everything. So for the 20th anniversary bass that came up a couple years ago, this kind of opportunity I've been with Aguilar for a long time, and they've been into making pickups. So it was kind of opportunity to honor their involvement in my career, and we developed this bass based on the GW 35, except that it's basswood. It has an ash top, so it makes a very nice finish. The sunburst finish looks really good on it. And then they did the sunburst on the ramp and the sunburst on the headstock. So gorgeous instrument with the Aguilar pickup. And it's lightweight, it resonates, it sounds great. And the price on it was like $12.99 or something like that, So, and I think they sold every one of them. So really, it's a great company, and sort of like a commentary on 2 things: how great it's been to work with Ibanez, and also a commentary on the music industry. I've made more money with royalties from selling instruments than music.
Yeah, that's
It's a great relationship, so I'm really lucky to be a part of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that that's, and it's amazing. It's a great relationship, great situation. But then on the other side, it's, how does that work? Why is that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you've had a good time. Again, I really appreciate you. Doing this interview, and I'd like to have you back sometime, because I feel like we just kind of just got it started.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, God bless you, and be well, and all of that good stuff. Stay safe and keep making great music, and
thanks.
Inspiring folks with your great teaching.
Awesome. Enjoyed it. Let's do it again.
All right, man.
Cool.
Have a good one.
All right, out.
All right, bye.